So, with this week, seeing the release of the first episode of Telltale's Batman game, I thought it would be interesting to take a look back at Telltale themselves, because they've only been around for 12 years, and to be quite honest, most people wouldn't have known their stuff until probably about 5 years ago or so, give or take, depending who you are. I mean, the obvious one, well, I won't even get to that because I'm going to sort of give a brief run through of their history, because there's some interesting facts behind some of it. So, they were formed at some point in June 2004. Made up from... Well, basically it was founded by Dan Connors, Kevin Brunner, and Troy Melander, who were three guys who formerly worked at LucasArts. And this was at the first sort of stages of LucasArts being wound down, wound up, wound every single way possible. At the time, they were developing a game called Sam & Max Freelance Police, which was a sequel to the classic Sam & Max Hit the Road game, which was out on DOS PC and all that back in, I think it was 93, 94-ish. And the thing is, a lot of people were like, we wanted to see a new Sam & Max game. So these guys said, well, let's make a games company so we can do it. So, over time, they spent the first 12 months or whatever, actually even less than that, working on the game, which was Telltale Texas Hold'em. I don't even know it's available. I don't think it's on Steam because I haven't noticed it before. But that came out in February 2011, February 11th, 2005. At least according to Wikipedia. And it's interesting that game was pretty well received, and interesting things would come of it in the future. But we'll get to that. Then they did their own... They did a mini-series, I guess, of games, if you want to call it that, based on characters called... well, it's based on Out from Boneville, the first volume of the Bone comic series by Jeff Smith. Admittedly, I haven't heard of it, but I think those games are on Steam now, and if you get them in the Steam sales, they really are very cheap. And they're the sort of really the game you'd expect from them. They're episodic adventure games, like pretty much everything that they've done since. But again, you know, they did that game. The first one came out in 2005. Then another one, a sequel, The Great Cow Race, came out in April of 2006. But in between then, well, only before by a month, they worked with Ubisoft on CSI, 3 Dimensions of Murder. Now, I know about this because I've played at least the first 3 CSI games. The other ones I have somewhere in the piles behind me. Well, not even behind me. Somewhere in my house. Because as you can see, there's a crap ton. The first ones, CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, CSI, I think it was CSI Dark Motives, I think it was called, were developed by 369 Interactive. And they were very limited in what they did. There were certain 3D models and whatever, but you know, nothing dramatically over the top. It was sort of fixed positions and you zoomed in, zoomed out sort of thing. Like with... It was sort of like a hidden object game where you had to zoom in on certain areas and then zoom in and then, get the tweezers to get a hair follicle or whatever. Then, Telltale were given the job of developing the next one, which was interesting because obviously the approach that they did for the game, as they did for all the CSI games, at least that I'm aware of, is it was episodic. There were multiple stories within the game. So this was the sort of first time they were doing an episodic game. Okay, it was all released in one go. It wasn't like how you see today with his episode 1, episode 2's coming in a month. And that does come further on down the line. As I say, we'll get to it. But the thing about the reason why it was called 3 Dimensions of Murder is because it was in 3D. And it was pretty well received. The added twist here is actually the PS2 version, which I've played. And don't worry, I have the PC version, so I'm intrigued to see what the difference is. The PlayStation 2 version was actually done by, adapted by a different studio, which was one of Ubisoft's studios in Bulgaria. The reason why it had to be is because Sony America demanded that because it was 3 dimensions, the character had to be able to walk round the area. And it took that Bulgarian crew a lot of time and effort, because the PS2 version didn't come out until I think nearly a year and a half after the original PC release of the Telltale version. But it's interesting that mechanic of walking around areas and doing stuff in a 3D environment is what eventually would come sort of, and actually is what Telltale would eventually do. Because from there, they did do another CSI game in 2007. I think that was by the looks of it, that probably was the PC one as well. May have been also it might have been on the 360 version. May have been redeveloped. Yeah, the Mac version was done by differently. And it was so it was also done on the Wii, apparently. But both the 360 and the Wii version and the PC were Telltale versions. So that PS2 one's a bit of a fluke, but I just think it's ironic that the stuff in that is what you get quite often in a lot of the games now. Because from then, the big thing for them was getting the Sam & Max license. And in October 2006, Sam & Max began to save the world. What was originally referred to as Sam & Max Season 1. And this is where it started, because from October, every month for 6 months, so November, December, January, February and March. Actually it says April here, so I guess they must have skipped a month or whatever. It came out as an episodic content for the 360 and PC. I doubt it came out episodic for the Wii. That was probably a bundled together release, but Sam & Max was back, and those games were wildly, massively praised. And they also went and did Sam & Max's Beyond Time and Space, aka Season 2, in 2008. And then 2010 they did Sam & Max The Devil's Playhouse, which I think is the last time that... Just have a quick look. I think that was the last Sam & Max game that they've done. So it'd be interesting to see whether they go back to it. somewhere down the line. But between then, they did another CSI, or they actually did 2 more CSI games, Deadly Intent and Fatal Conspiracy in 2009 and 2010. But aside from that, you had another stream of monthly games. 2008's one was Strong Bad's Cool Game for Attractive People, which again is also available on Steam and all that. That one is based on the Homestar Runner web cartoon, which I haven't heard of, but it's a Telltale game, so I'm probably going to enjoy it. It's in my Steam list, so I haven't got to it. But then 2009 was the one where it touched my heart the most, and thankfully I bought it before it got removed off sale on GOG. They had Wallace and Gromit's Adventures, which were episodic. It was 4 episodes, I believe, of just different tales. And I am, a huge fan of Wallace and Gromit. And the fact that this was available, I only found out when it was on GOG, and like when it got pulled, I was like, I am buying that. No matter what, I am buying that. Thankfully I did, because if you want to try it, buy it now. I think because of licensing things and everything, it isn't available. At least in terms of digital release. There probably are physical releases, because I do remember seeing it. I may have even bought a physical release version as well, somewhere even before I got it digitally on GOG. And then also in 2009, for the fall really, we had Tales of Monkey Island. So we had a properly sort of endorsed return to the Monkey Island franchise. Again, critical acclaim galore. They also vended a game called, it's called Nelson Tever's Puzzle Agent. But if you search for it on Steam, it's mostly just referred to as Puzzle Agent. Now that one went back to the standalone title, but again it was sort of a adventure style puzzle game that was being worked, and was sort of influenced by a lot of filmic stuff. Certainly if you look at the artwork, the artwork, if you look at the Steam icon thing, that's clearly a rip-off of, not rip-off, inspired by Fargo. But it sort of has the old thing of dialogue trees, but also the adventure and the puzzle mechanics and trying to work things out. And that was mid-2010. Then late 2010 was when quite a lot of people started paying a bit more notice, because we had Back to the Future, the game, which came out from like December through to December 2010 through to June 2011, which again was pretty well received. That's going to be a running trend, well received. The CSI games weren't so much, but it's interesting to see like the stuff they did for Ubisoft there and how they brought it into their own stuff, because I think pretty much everything from then on, I think they self-published. I believe. But also in 2010, we saw Poker Night at the Inventory. So they basically took the original Texas Hold'em game that they did back in 2005 and added Tycho from Penny Arcade, Max from Sam & Max, the Heavy guy from Team Fortress 2, and then also Strong Bad from the Homestar Runner series. and made a poker game out of it. And like with fun little witticisms from the characters and stuff, it was actually pretty impressive and pretty nice. And of course, you know, with all these characters crossing over, this was the first time that it was like you were seeing franchise that you didn't expect to see together, yet alone in a Telltale game. I mean, apart from Sam and Max and the character from the cartoon, because obviously they'd done games with them previously. But from after that, they also did Jurassic Park, the game, which wasn't entirely... I don't remember huge about that, but that was episodic, but it was a standalone release in 2011. They also did a Law & Order Legacies game. So they actually did Law & Order 1, I guess, because of how well they did with the CSI stuff, which again would have been Ubisoft, I think, because of the publishing, over 2011 to 2012. And then 2012 is when the shit hit the fan, because that's when Walking Dead started. You know, the monolith that is that game, and Clementine, and Lee, and... oh, wow. So well done. And then they did 400 Days, which is the sort of DLC expansion, which would evolve into what would happen with Season 2. But in between them came Poker Night at the Inventory 2, which had even more of a twist, because this time it was Sam from Sam and Max, but also Brock Sampson from the Venture Brothers, Ash Williams from the Evil Dead, and Claptrap from the Borderlands games, with GLaDOS from Portal as the dealer for the event. I mean, it was crazy, but again, in terms of the poker stuff, it was actually a pretty damn good game. Admittedly, some of the phrases could get repetitive if certain things happen, but I mean, the most important thing is, like with nearly all of the Telltale games, it is fun. That's sort of, you know, that's their official, unofficial motto or whatever, but it was fun. And then from there, we started going into sort of, we're doing 2 a year, or 2 at a time. So I guess we have the studio split into 2. So then you got one part of the guys doing Wolf Among Us, and then the other part working on Season 2 of The Walking Dead, continuing on the story of people, because I don't want to give spoilers. Then, in 2014-2015 period, we saw Tales from the Borderlands and the Game of Thrones game. Game of Thrones had... it was still well received, but not as well as Borderlands had been, and Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us had, admittedly. But I think people overall liked it. Which then leads us to the most recent stuff, because we had Minecraft Story Mode, one that I guess was so popular, and because Microsoft, because they own Mojang now, wanted more of it. They did the 5 episodes as they originally intended, and then they said, oh wait, we're doing 3 episodes more. So if people bought it and then got the season pass, they had to buy a second season pass, which is a bit awkward. So I'm guessing, considering how episode 6 has only just come out, I would say if you haven't got it already, Wait until episode 7 comes out, because there will probably be a definitive edition bundle somewhere around there. We then had the sort of mini-series of Walking Dead Michonne, which again was, although it was short, it was very impactful, giving us backstory. I mean, it sort of is, I think it was backstory that was actually authorized by Kirkham. So the stuff that is portrayed in the game, let me just check this. Yeah, taking place between issues 126 and 139 of the comic series, it shows what she was up to during her departure from the group of survivors. So I believe the story that happens in this, I think, is officially sort of canon. I think. I'm not sure. Which then revolves into Batman coming in. The trailer looks very good. Troy Baker as the Batman. Let me just see who else we've got voicing. If we've got a catalyst, of course. Laura Bailey's going to be Catwoman. Travis Willingham will be Harvey Dent. Erin Yvette as Vicky Vale. Anne Reitel as Alfred. Murphy Geyer as Lieutenant James Gordon. And Richard McGonigal as Falcone. That's the only ones confirmed so far. The interesting thing with this one as well is something they're adding, I guess, due to the fact that it's gone down so well with people watching it on Twitch, or, you know, having like parties where people play it together. They're adding in a new thing called crowd play, where the idea is that people will be able to, sort of like with Jackbox's party pack games like Fibbage and all that stuff, which is ironic because the physical retail versions of the console editions of those games are published by Telltale. So perhaps they took the system and used it, I don't know. The idea is for the certain like key decisions, like the big things, because normally at the end of each episode you get an idea of how many people chose what pivotal decision, sort of thing. And the idea is, I think, at these points, people will be able to pick and stuff. At the minute, they're not using it with Twitch at the minute because of latency, because there's a delay and whatever. But they're trying to incorporate it in eventually. But for this one, it's sort of going to be local play only, you know, and the online sort of Twitch streaming stuff, it will be sort of at your own risk, and it may not work and whatever. But yeah, basically, when they premiered Borderlands, apparently people were shouting out, "Do that decision, no, do this decision." And Telltale took it on board, and that's why it's going to be coming. I believe they're going to try and incorporate it into all future Telltale games where they can. And speaking of the future, they have confirmed that somewhere later this year, Season 3 of Walking Dead will be on. And then, most interestingly, there will be a Season 2 of Game of Thrones, as well as, and they haven't said what, an untitled Marvel game. So Marvel's going to be getting, I guess, because if it was good enough for DC with Batman, it's good enough for Marvel and whatever they've got planned up their sleeve. I mean, could it be Spider-Man? Could it be Avengers? Could it be Guardians of the Galaxy? I mean, it could honestly be any one of the sort of heroes, but I'm just trying to think of ones that would fit the sort of Telltale style. Because if you did Guardians of the Galaxy, you could do it very Tales of the Borderlands dramatic, but very light-hearted sort of thing. Or, if you did it with an Avengers one, you could actually make it a much darker sort of a more darker, serious sort of take on the Avengers rather than the version that you're getting on the cinema screens, which is suitable for children and all that. And yeah, it's been an interesting 12 years. Well, 11 if you count the first game coming out in 2005. But Telltale, okay, they've had some blips here and there, but I'd say overall, if you look at that studio and how they've fared in terms of overall response, it's really been up there, really been positive. And you know what? Let's hope that can continue. Because the style of games that they were doing, the sort of adventure-style games, which would have been point and click back in the day, because of the success of these, it's now becoming a thing again. Case in point, if you didn't have Walking Dead, you wouldn't have had Life is Strange, and that went down very, very well. Certainly, I don't think you'd have seen even in the early days. I don't, because I think Mass Effect was what 2007. Because of all the dialogue trees and everything, and all the different options there. There's so much stuff that's been in the Telltale games over the years. Yes, even the CSI ones, where you can sort of see inspiration. And that's actually so nice to see. And all I have to say is, I can't wait to see what they come up with next. Long may they continue.